Herzlich willkommen zu einer neuen Ausgabe CROPfm. Mein heutiger Telefongast ist Linda Moulton Howe aus Albuquerque und es geht um die Kornkress-Saison 2005. Und wie immer gibt es natürlich den CROPcom, jenen Live-Chat nämlich, mit denen sich Zuhörer dieser Sendung live am Gespräch beteiligen können. Erreichbar über die Website von CROPfm, CROPfm.mur.at und dann auf CROPcom klicken. Ich sehe diesen Chat hier ein und gebe Fragen und Kommentare gerne an den Telefongast weiter. Linda Moulton Howe is my guest tonight. She graduated at Stanford University with a master degree in communications. Ms. Howe has received local and national and international awards, including 3 regional Emmys and a national Emmy nomination. She has devoted her documentary film and television and radio career to productions concerning science, medicine and the environment. Linda, can you hear me? Hello?
It is so hard to hear you.
All right. Is it better now?
You need to come up more in volume.
Okay. Is it better?
Now, that's good.
Okay.
Thank you.
So we can hear you all right. Linda, tonight we would like to talk. You've already been on my show for two times, and
right.
We always seem to make a show in September, funnily enough.
Okay.
The last 2 times were in September too. So, tonight I would like to talk about crop circles with you. The title of the show is Crop Circles 2005, and of course there have been astounding and copious amounts of formations cropping up in Wiltshire in England. South England, but also in the United States. So,
I'd like to, Tariq, I'm sorry, I'd like to jump in here for a second
to
say, so that your
Please
audience
do so.
knows, a lot of people hear about England, and they hear only about Wiltshire. And what was extraordinary about 2005 is how many amazing crop formations occurred in counties beyond Wiltshire, some of the most amazing. And that, to me, is something that I hope audiences realize, that even though they hear about Wiltshire, they also hear about so-called hoaxers in Wiltshire. Well, this year, England had amazing patterns in many, many other counties far beyond Wiltshire, and what happened in the United States was also especially interesting.
Yes, and there are 2 articles linked up from my site right now, so anyone who listens to the show or in the past show's archive can access those articles. And so, do you want to start off with the with the U.S. formations, or?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And for your listeners, in case they're not at your website, I would like to give out my website address, because you can go and look at everything I'm talking about at www.earthfiles.com. Think of a reporter filing files about the Earth. So it's EARTH, F as in Frank, ILES as in Sam, www.earthfiles.com. I have over 100 reports at Earthfiles now about crop formations around the world since 1999. And this year, Tariq, what was so interesting in the United States is that beginning on May 25th in the most unlikely place, the desert region of Phoenix, Arizona. But in Phoenix, it isn't just all dry desert and cactus. There are a lot of farms that grow barley and wheat and various things like that are cereal crops. And on May 25th, a report was made to Jeff Wilson, who runs an independent investigation unit. It's called the Independent Crop Circle Researchers Association based in Ohio. And he received a call from somebody there, called me. A bunch of us got involved in the investigation. And when you looked at the aerials, there were many people, when I started posting stories about this strange downing of barley in what's called Tolleson, it's a suburb of Phoenix, people started emailing me saying, Linda, it looks like digital or binary code. Now, why were they having that reaction? Well, when you go to the photographs at earthfiles.com and you look at the aerials of what happened in Phoenix, all of the plants were laid down in a very strangely straight way along irrigation ditches, little irrigation ditches. This is one of those unusual cases that does not exist in England or Canada or most of the rest of the United States. People do not have irrigation ditches for their cereal crops. But in this case, because it was a smaller farm, and this farmer, having to deal with the heat and the dryness of Phoenix, had planted all of his barley crop on, they're called berms. Those are little raised areas so that they could channel water that they would flow into their cereal crops in channels between the little raised hills or berms so they could keep the water in there. Okay, so everybody thought, and the farmer thought, that the reason why all of these plants were laid down in these odd, very straight ways was because there were these irrigation channels. However, when people went in to investigate on the ground, they were not convinced that that explained it. And when they began looking at the growth nodes, when they began looking at what was happening on the soil, we found all of the peculiar anomalies in this strange so-called randomly downed crop in Phoenix that we find in the beautiful geometrical patterns that we've studied in England and Canada and a few in the United States and elsewhere. Now, what did we find? That the growth nodes were elongated. They were elongated quite a bit, and they found what are called expulsion cavities in the growth nodes. These are little holes that the biophysicists in Europe and the United States who have studied them are convinced that some kind of heating mechanism, such as microwave energy, is applied to the crops in what W.C. Levengood, the biophysicist in Michigan, describes as a spinning plasma vortex. A plasma is stripped electrons, negatively and positively charged, and his work, the work of Elcho Hasselhoff in Holland, has confirmed the same thing. That physicist in Europe feels the same way, agrees with the biophysicist in the United States, that when you physically study what happens to the plants in a lot of these formations, it appears as if there has to be charge, and a plasma has negative and positive charge, and that there has to be at least some microwave component that is doing very, very rapid heating, perhaps only in 3 or 4 seconds. And when everybody started examining what they were finding in this first so-called randomly down, but strangely randomly down pattern in Phoenix, Arizona, we found all of those same kinds of changes to the growth nodes. The biophysicists also found a larger than normal concentration of magnetite on the surface of the soil. And this is significant because around the world in soils, there's kind of an average for iron that will be attracted to a magnet. And what has been a consistent anomaly in many of the crop formations studied, ranging from Israel to Canada to the United States to various countries in Europe, is that when soil is collected at the base of plants in crop formations, it can contain up to 750 times the amount of magnetite that is found in normal soil. Why should there be a concentration of magnetite inside of crop formations? And if you go outside of crop formations, there's hardly any. Well, this fits again into the biophysicists' hypothesis that we're dealing with a spinning plasma vortex that has some kind of microwave energy. And this is really an important concept for listeners to have in their head as we go forward talking about formations in the United States and in England this year. And that is,
Linda, I have a question. These magnetite residues that they find in those crop cycles, do they have any idea whether this is an effect of the plasma vortexes, or is this more something that is put into the crop so that the plasma vortexes can affect the crop more easily?
This is what I'm coming to.
Okay.
The hypothesis is that the spinning plasma vortex originates high in the Earth's atmosphere. What the source of the spinning energy is, no one knows. None of the biophysicists or physicists can speculate about that. But they are pretty certain that these stripped electrons begin spinning and that they carry with them a microwave component. The source of that is unknown as well. But you now have a combination of stripped electrons, negatively and positively charged, that are also carrying microwave energy and spinning and coming down through the atmosphere. And what is in the atmosphere? Tremendous amounts of meteoritic iron dust from all of the meteors that go through our atmosphere every day of every hour around the year. And they think that these spinning plasma vortices are interacting with magnetic fields and trapping meteoritic iron dust into this spinning plasma vortex, that as it comes down close to the Earth to lay down the crop plants for whatever reason this is occurring, that then the iron inside has been melted by the microwave energy that is in that spinning vortex and sprays out. Now, iron that has been magnetized in this process by coming down through magnetic fields, and that is what is found coated in a very, very thin layer on plants and on the soil. And this is fascinating, Tariq, because it means that we can at least get to some kind of a hypothesis about the physical mechanism of the energy that is putting down the plants. Even if we don't know the source, we don't know what the intelligence is, we don't know the reason, we know that we're involved with physical evidence that relates to this spinning plasma. And now when you come to the kind of a fundamental question here, in 2005, why is it that all of these amazing patterns that are so beautiful and geometric and harken back to ancient symbols appear in England and in other places in Europe, but when it came to the United States this year and in previous years, especially this year, we had a contrast of all of this strange, randomly downed, but in very odd lines. And this is important because this lining up of the plants, even if it doesn't look like a geometry, was also occurred on July 3rd in Greene County, Pennsylvania. And when you compare the photographs of what happened in Greene County, Pennsylvania, which is completely on the other side of the United States from Phoenix, Arizona, and we're talking about May 25th to July 3rd, we're talking about 4 to 6 weeks later, separated by 2,500 or so miles, that when you look at the photographs, they look quite similar. And Jeffrey Wilson and I have talked about this. What in the world could be happening? And the only possibility that everybody, including the biophysicists that we've talked with too, they come up with this really interesting idea. The United States is notorious on the planet for having violent, turbulent weather. We're always having violent, turbulent weather somewhere, it seems, in the United States. The jet stream plays a very erratic and unpredictable role, always going across the United States at some place. And their thinking is that perhaps the same spinning plasma vortex that would come down in a field in Wiltshire or another county in England where everything is calm and there's a lot of humidity, that a pattern can sustain itself in this plasma when it comes down and interacts with the crops. But in the United States, the same mechanism, the same spinning plasma, may start down to do a geometry, and because there is so much turbulence, it gets disrupted into these odd patterns that are now called randomly downed events that contain the same anomalous physical evidence that we have found in the beautiful geometries. So in the United States this year, we had these strange randomly downed, but we also had a very, very interesting series of events that began on June 13th in North Carolina, all of these, where there was a series of 6 circle patterns, and every one of them was at elevations above 2,000 feet. And Jeffrey Wilson thinks this is the first time ever on record, at least in the United States, that these are geometry. These were all geometric patterns, all occurred at such a high altitude, and that in and of itself is interesting, but also, why did 6 patterns come down in a few weeks, all in the same state in the United States, North Carolina? And in one particular case, it's very, very interesting. There were multiple eyewitnesses who described a, quote, blinding white light. That was their description, a blinding white light that was seen the night of what would be June 20th to June 21st, that transition around midnight. And in the morning, people going to a church early on a Sunday morning to clean it up, they found this 4-circle pattern, sort of like a king kunks from the early days in England, and it had occurred in 6 to 7 foot high hay. And it was found by these people, and the witnesses from the night before came forward, and they described seeing this amazing blinding light exactly in the place where people found, we'll call it a kind of king kunks 4-circle pattern the next morning. And another thing, animals were heard to be extremely agitated that night in association with the appearance of this blinding light. They heard cows bellowing, they heard dogs that were upset, and this is also an association that has been described occasionally in England. Now, I hope this has not been too many words for too long, but I thought I would at least set the stage with what we think is making crop formations without knowing the source, and to explain that in the United States in 2005 has been this fascinating contrast, for reasons unknown, between very odd, kind of straight-lined, randomly down patterns, and geometric patterns such as these 6 in North Carolina.
Linda, in your article you say that in Coles County, Illinois, the formations that appeared there, these unusual bright lights, white balls of lights, were seen with beams going down into the crop. Is this now another theory of how those formations are being made, or is this how does this go together with the theory of Dr. Levengood and others that plasma vortices produce the crop circles?
It's an excellent question. If you go back to the work that Elschel Hasselhoff did in Holland, I think it was in the year 99, and it was in the cereal crop behind the home of Robert van der Broeke, who is now famous for having described multiple incidents of mysterious lights over crops, in which he has described seeing the crops go down in the presence of these lights multiple times. Other people in the town of Howe have seen these lights. So they are definitely a part of this phenomena. They've been described in England, Canada, the United States, Australia, all over the world. How would the mysterious small lights that on the videotapes that exist, that physicists have looked at, estimate the size of these lights are no more than 6 inches to 12 inches in diameter? How would they relate to the spinning plasma vortex coming from high in the atmosphere, spinning down to the Earth? I don't think that Elschel Hasselhoff or W.C. Levengood can give an absolutely definitive answer, but we've all talked about it before. And here is as close as we can get. We don't fully understand the source, and we don't understand the mechanism that sets the various patterns in play, but if the spinning plasma vortex is the transport for the energy that accomplishes it, and it is made out of stripped electrons in ions, ions can glow. That is the reason why the so-called ball lightning phenomena can be seen. The ions are glowing. That is why lightning can be seen. Energy is going through the atoms in the electrons in clouds, and the ionization lights up the lightning. So the thinking is that there is something about this process of these spinning plasma vortices that when it finally is focused at the smallest point, which is to these patterns on the ground, that the ions then glow, and that this may be one of the reasons why these mysterious lights are seen to come into existence, move around, and then disappear.
A listener in the chat is asking the question, so these balls of light seem to be the only direct way of visually confirming the existence of the plasma vortices, or can they be seen directly as well?
I think Lucy Pringle, who's a British investigator, has a very, very fascinating story at the beginning of one of her books about a couple being out in an area. I don't even think it was in Wiltshire. It may have been in Hampshire, a different county. And this goes back many years ago. And they were sort of suddenly, I mean, it happened so suddenly. It was not like a storm or anything. It just that they were out for a walk. And as they said, it was as if the air was spinning around them, and it affected them. It blew their clothes and all of these things. And then within seconds, they saw a crop formation go down. So
they actually witnessed the formation. They actually witnessed how a formation was produced.
Yes, in relationship to this sudden spinning in the air near them.
Mm-hmm.
And there have been people in England who have described seeing something that reminded them of beams. And so you've got a combination. You've got a combination of moving, small, mysterious lights, a few descriptions of beams over the years. Are those beams where the ions are glowing inside of these spinning vortices? That's a question I wish I could answer, but it's a possibility.
Is there any, before we move on to the crop circles in England, the messages that appeared in the US, in the formations of the United States, was there any decoding done? Was there any? I mean, in one of your articles you talk about Hawkins' relations, I think, or.
You're talking about Gerald Hawkins, the astronomer?
Yes.
Okay, in my book, Mysterious Lights in Crop Circles, there is a wonderful contribution from Gerald Hawkins, a mathematician and astronomer who sadly died within the last couple of years. He also contributed to my book, Glimpses of Other Realities, Volume 1, Facts and Eyewitnesses. That was the first time that he talked about his investigation as a mathematician, trying to analyze crop formations. In that case, the ones that he was concentrating on were all from Wiltshire, England, back in the 1990s. When Gerald Hawkins reported his first analyses, it was stunning because he was finding that there were ratios called diatonic ratios. If listeners think in their mind of a keyboard on a piano, and they can imagine their thumb going on middle C and their next finger on D, E, F, G, A, B, and then you repeat again at C, every one of those strings making the sound that we know as middle C and the other notes happens because the frequency is always the same, and the white keys are always diatonic ratios, and the number fraction for middle C will always be precisely the same mathematical fraction. If not, the key is out of tune. So thinking that we have an analogy with sound to give us a sense of diatonic ratios, why would repeating diatonic ratios be found over and over again in the diameters, the radii, the lengths that were being measured and analyzed by the mathematician? It was so consistent that it went beyond any fluke or chance, and this is what provoked Gerald Hawkins, who wrote the classic book called Stonehenge Decoded. This is what provoked him to describe a number-to-letter system. So in your mind's eye, if you can see that keyboard and you can see middle C, okay, that diatonic ratio is the letter C. The next diatonic ratio is D, E, F, G, A, B, and then you're back to a C that's an octave above middle C. But you've now got letters attached to these fractions. Then Gerald Hawkins started looking at the crop formations as a code, and he would find the fractions, the repeating diatonic ratios, and write down the letters that would go with those fractions, and he began to wonder if something, an intelligence of some sort, was trying to force human minds to find the numbers and go to letters so that we could understand something about the crop formations. And that work of Gerald Hawkins which was focused on England, has been studied by other people. Other kinds of mathematical ratios and codes have been found. And when you come to the year of 2005, I think it is especially interesting that in England, and I'm going on my earthfiles.com right now to an August 9th report that I did called 3 Extraordinary UK Crop Formations Reported August 9th, 2005, followed a month later by a report that I did called Mayan Clock, ? And the reason why all this is perhaps tied together. Gerald Hawkins was the first to find a repeating mathematical ratio in a lot of crop formations and brought up the question, could it be forcing us to look at numbers and letters? Now, in 2005, beginning at a place called Wayland's Smithy, that's a megalithic site near Ashbury, and this is on the Wiltshire side of the county line, very near the Oxfordshire county line. And if you go to this article in Earth Files on August 9th, you will find a map. And the map shows that in Wayland's Smithy, then later in Woolstone, which is very, very near Wayland's Smithy, at a place called Shalbourne and another place called Marden. Woolstone was the fourth that came later. The first three were Wayland's Smithy, Shalbourne, and Marden. What was fascinating is that Wayland's Smithy immediately caught the attention of people in Mexico and South America as related to the Mayan calendar. They provoked to such an extent that one of the television personalities in Mexico City, Jaime Maussan, called me up and said, I must go. We are convinced that this is related to our Mayan calendar count. And he went over and got some beautiful videotape flying over Wellstone. And you really have to go to these photographs at earthfiles.com as they line up chronologically so that you can see the progression that Wayland Smithy, all these three that came down on August 9th, all came down in a triangular kind of configuration in the county of Wiltshire. The one at Shalbourne, everybody said, looked like a digital disc. We're back to the way they were describing those strange, straight, randomly down patterns in the United States, but no one could decode anything from them. Now we're looking at a digital disc pattern. Nobody has decoded anything from it either, but it certainly looks like digital encoding on a disc. And then at Marden in Wiltshire, same day, August 9th, a Mayan pattern, a digital disc, and 4 circles around a large circle, the 4 circles connected by a thin ring, the entire pattern surrounded by a thin ring, so it looks sort of astronomical. And in the center of it was what many people thought looked like the head of a horse surrounded by organic material. And the controversy has raged about what is the link that looks so astronomical supposed to be in Marden. Well, all right, so that was August 9th. Then in Woolstone, which was very near Wayland Smithy, where what the people in Mexico and South America are convinced is related to the Mayan calendar, came on August 13th, 4 days later, after the 3 on August 9th. At Woolstone is this unbelievably beautiful pattern that has a 6-pointed star in the middle, surrounded by a circle in which there are what look like very specific numbers of feathers. surrounded by a square grid pattern, surrounded by more what appear to be counting feathers, all surrounded by a ring of flattened plant. It's quite complex. The aerial is amazing. Well, I was stunned when I received an email from a scientist in Australia who has requested anonymity to this day because sadly, Tariq, crop formations are considered to be only the work of hoaxers. Therefore, no one is supposed to pay any attention. Crop circles are not politically acceptable, and scientists in mainstream academia who pay attention to crop circles may lose their job, be ridiculed, and it is one of the big problems in this world today that here is a substantial Earth mystery that has been affecting both hemispheres of our planet for at least 15 years, if not 20. And these patterns came down in 2005, no matter who made them, with material inside of them that is remarkably mathematical. And this Australian scientist saw something that not another person, not anybody else in the world saw, but as soon as it was pointed out, people went, oh my God. Now, so I am sorry I cannot give the name, I cannot give even the type of science this man does at his request, but I can summarize for you what he found. I wish that all of your listeners were looking at an aerial photograph that I have at earthfiles.com in this story called Mayan Clock.
What's the date?
And that is September 2nd, 2005, Earth Files, Mayan Clock, ?
Okay, I will link up all those articles to the show entry then in the past shows section, so people can find it more easily.
I hope so, because what I'm going to describe, you actually have to be looking at the pattern, and you have to be seeing the quotes from the scientist analyses, but I will try to help you and your listeners. If you're looking at the Woolstone aerial, what I did in Photoshop was I took a yellow color and I put a yellow dot on what were little blocks of standing wheat in each of these square Mayan-like geometries that surround the six-pointed star. And if you start, it depends on the guidance here is how do you know where to start? Well, I'm starting where the scientist started, which is in the far upper right. We'll call it square, a series of squares. There's a yellow dot. When you go to the next square, that yellow dot turns 90 degrees down from where it started in square one. When you go to the third square, the dot has turned another 90 degrees. So you've got a ticking, a sequence now. And for whatever reasons, between square 3 and square 4, there is no motion. The dot stops moving. But when you go to square 5...
Sorry, we're looking at the picture that is titled Woolstone Hill near Uffington, Oxfordshire. Is that...
Okay, now, if you are at the September 2nd, 2005 report...
Yeah.
It starts with a big map showing where these locations are, and you scroll down past Wayland Smithy.
Yeah.
You scroll down to Woolstone Hill near Uffington, Oxfordshire.
Yeah.
Then you scroll down, you'll see one scientist's interpretation. You go past the Silbury Mayan 2004 calendar. Well, that's what they called it. You go down to, you go through the scientist's analysis, and you come to Mayan clock with moving counter.
All right. All right.
And the big, large photograph in that section has yellow dots in it.
Yeah, I can see it now, yeah.
The far right upper yellow dot is where I started because the scientists started there. And you will see as you come across the top 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 Mayan-like squares that dot is changing place on 90-degree turns. Do you see that?
Yes.
When you get to the when you go from 3 to 4, squares 3 to 4, for reasons unknown, the yellow dot does not move. But when you go to square 5 and you come down, you will see that the yellow dot moves very consistently, 90-degree turns, all the way around in this formation until it gets to square 15. Square 15 to 16 do not appear to have the standing clumps that have been clearly and persistently created in the previous 14 squares in which that clump moves like a ticking clock, with each clump changing 90 degrees. Can you see that?
Yes, I can see that, yeah.
So the scientist raises the question, why does the pattern break at 15 to 16? He goes into an analysis, which is with this photograph, that, quote, so Wolfstone Hill seems to mean everything will go according to past pattern in our current Mayan century until the last 1/16th of that Mayan century. And where does that end up? Mid-2009 to late 2012, when the course of events change. This is his analysis, that the two unmarked squares between 15 and 16, somebody was saying if you take the last Mayan century and you divide it by 16s, and that it's a harbinger that there is a big change coming between mid-2009 to the end of 2012. And of course, people like Jaime Maussan and others in Mexico and South America, they've all been expecting that 2012, which ends the Grand Mayan calendar, which is more than 3,000 years old, that something is going to happen in 2012. This scientist from Australia is saying, quote, it seems to focus on the near future dates of mid-August 2007, after midsummer 2009, and late 2012 as a significant time indeed. According to Mayan legend, it will be a time of great worldwide earthquakes, also prophesied in other ancient cultures. And then he goes on to say, how could any advanced intelligence know about earthquakes and earth events so far in advance? And that, Tariq, is the haunting question for all of us. If the crop formations are some kind of warning or some kind of advanced knowledge about events that have been coming for a long time, that something knew the timelines on this planet and knew that there would be catastrophes or gigantic changes of some sort, have the crop formations themselves been warnings and we have not understood them?
Who do you think does give those warnings, if these are indeed warnings?
Well, now you're asking about what could be behind these spinning plasma vortices.
In a way, yes.
Oh, I'm telling you, if you sit in a pub in England late at night after spending a day out in crop formations, and you talk with people who have been going into crop circles for the last 15 years, you will hear so many different opinions about what is at work, and I can share with you at least some of the ideas. Robert van der Broeke in Holland, he thinks literally, and I'm not joking. He is a fellow that everybody who knows him says he's extremely serious, is not a jokester, takes all of this very seriously. He thinks that we are dealing with angels, and I mean literally angelic realms. Now, an angel in Austria, and an angel in the United States, and an angel in Iraq, and an angel in Russia, China, around the world. I have no idea how you would say what is in the minds of people when they hear the word angel. All I can do is say that historically there has always been, in every nation of the earth, for going back to the beginning of human literature, there have always been descriptions about entities with intelligence, entities that knew about events that were going to happen in people's lives in the Earth's history before they occurred, and people referred to them as angels or angels of God. And if Robert van der Broeke then is right, we are dealing with intelligence that can take naturally occurring particles, such as ions, spin them, add microwave, and make all these elaborate patterns with very specific mathematically encoded patterns. And then you step back and say, if that were true, why is it that humans never have understood what's in the crop formations except for a few, 2 or 3, I mean no more than 2 or 3 or 4 isolated people, such as Dr. Hawkins, such as the scientists in Australia, going back to the early work of Wolfgang Schindler in the very early 90s, a German who saw mathematical patterns in crop formations. But in terms of even those men saying that they understand exactly what the math adds up to, nobody knows. So this has always raised a question in my mind. Could it be that all the complexities of the crop formations, including Wayland Smithy this year and Woolstone and what appears to be a ticking clock of some sort, could it be that they're not even designed for human understanding? Could it be that the crop formations are a result of something else that is going on that is so incomprehensible to the human mind that nothing out there is bothering to explain to us? Now, one of those possibly incomprehensible hypotheses has been discussed by people quite a bit, and that is, could we be dealing with time travelers? Time travelers from someplace far into the future of the Earth, far into the future of some other solar system, far into the future of another universe, and that for reasons that they can't explain, are not bothering to explain, we're not supposed to understand, I do not know, but that whatever is going on, the time travelers are trying to do something to change time, and that part of the residue of those efforts ends up having math as part of its process. The math then gets translated on our world as these crop formations, but has to do with a much larger process in time. And in saying that, even though it's incomprehensible, it shows you how far people have gone in trying to understand crop formations, from angels to time travelers.
So crop circles might not necessarily be a communication directed at humans. Is that what you're suggesting?
Yeah. I'm not saying that's the answer. I'm saying that's one possible thought to consider.
Because the question, of course, would be if it is communication to humans. Some people in the chat asked this question: why is the communication not more direct, so that more people can understand it?
Exactly. Exactly. And that's what I meant. When you look at how difficult all of this has been, and it has been persisting for at least 15 or 20 years, humans don't get it. Humans now largely ignore it, except for a very, very few persistent people like myself, you, and a few scientists that realize there is something going on here that seems to have a lot of profound, we'll put it this way, it is profound both in the geometric patterns that harken back to ancient symbols, it is profound in the mathematical, well, let's call them patterns, because diatonic ratios are different from a ticking clock in the Woolstone pattern, but they both involve very precise math. And you stand back and say, what would be an intelligence's reason for using extremely precise math in the cereal crops of our Earth? What do you think, Tariq?
To be honest, I have no idea. That's why I like the subject. It just keeps on confusing and astonishing me. So I'm
yeah, and that it is a major mystery that does not go away and is never solved.
Well, and yes, that's one thing. And then the other thing is, I mean, this year's season, I've not been following as closely as previous seasons, and I also didn't have the time to go to Wiltshire myself. But from time to time, I looked onto Crop Circle Connector, which is an excellent site showing all the crop circles of the UK crop circles, at least.
Oh, it is.
Yes, it's very well done and excellent quality pictures and so on. And I realized that this year's season is extraordinary. I mean, there have been so many beautiful patterns, huge patterns, complex patterns. I mean, I've been in this last Mayan pattern last year, but this year we had several of those, even more complex. But as always, no press coverage, and in general, I get the feeling that the subject is not being talked about as much as it used to be, which is...
Oh, definitely not, but I hope, Tariq, that you and your listeners will at least consider that earthfiles.com, my news website,
which is a great website, and it's not only about crop circles, it's about cattle mutilations and all kinds of things. I can just recommend it. Science and
environment and real X-Files.
And real X-Files, exactly. These are the main headings, and underneath those headings you find all kinds of excellent articles. So
I come from mainstream journalism in the United States, and my site is looked at, and I have tremendous amounts of communication by many scientists, by people in the political world in the United States, by engineers, by a lot of professionals who keep up with Earth Files, and that means they are aware of crop formations, whether or not it is publicly discussed or not.
So you already mentioned that a lot of people are being ridiculed, and they just have to they have to be fearful of losing their job if they investigate crop circles. Yeah,
that's right.
So you personally met people on university level, etc., that wouldn't even tell you their name.
I know who they are.
I mean, yes, but they wouldn't allow you to.
Yes, as a reporter, they request anonymity because they are afraid of having some negative consequence in their job, in their position. But the important thing to me is that really credible, really responsible scientists are paying attention to crop formations, are offering insights and analyses because they think something very, very important is going on in the cereal crops of this planet.
And then, of course, there's the year 2012 that crops up all the time.
Yeah.
Me personally, I don't believe in those dates, to be honest, but it's getting spooky.
No, let's separate fact from chaff here.
Yeah.
The fact is, there's nobody who would dispute this. No one. The Mayan calendar has had mathematical cyclic dates going back for 2,000 years. And the fact that what's called the Grand Mayan calendar, you have to study a little bit about Mayan history to realize that this was a culture that used dots and used squares to count, and that their counting was done in circles. So all of their calendars were cylindrical, circular, and defined by graphic images in which dots and lines were their counting mechanism. And these huge calendars were broken down into cycles of what we would call time. The Mayan calendar has been studied and written about for centuries. The Grand Mayan calendar goes way back to 3,000 something BC, which is, I correct myself, it's more than 5,000 years old, the Grand Mayan calendar. It has always, carved in stone, had an end date. And that end date for all these centuries has always been what would be in the year 2012. At the end of the calendar year of 2012, December 22nd comes into the count, having to do with how the Mayan calendars were broken down. Now, that is a fact. That's been out there and discussed in the literature for centuries, this strange Grand Mayan calendar. All of the other little Mayan calendars are broken up into other little segments of time and calendars that are all embedded within this Grand Mayan calendar. It seems to me that all of us should ask ourselves, is it possible that the Mayans were taught something about cycles in this solar system, this galaxy, and the universe? Is it possible that other intelligences that we might call extraterrestrial were involved intimately with the Mayan civilization, teaching it something about calendars and counting and events? Could it be that the Grand Mayan calendar ends in the year 2012 for a very specific reason? Is it possible that there is something going on astronomically with our galaxy, with this solar system, something in the universe, that is going to occur on December 22nd, 2012? Will it be catastrophic? Will it be wonderful? Will it be something in between? Will it be nothing? We went through Y2K on the switch from 1900s to 2000, and everybody was afraid that all of our computers and everything was going to fail, and there was a tremendous amount of effort to get us through into 2000 without computers stopping, and everything went on really pretty well. Well, maybe that's what will happen in 2012, and then again, maybe all of the crop formations have had something to do with an intelligence that is linked to an intelligence that was communicating with the Mayans, the Aztec, other civilizations, having to do with upcoming events in time on this planet that might have great effect on surface life. That's why I think some people are nervous. In Mexico, in South America, I know they take the 2012 date very seriously. They are very concerned that there will be a catastrophe. But my point of view as a Western mind is that the end of something on a calendar does not mean it has to be catastrophic. The end of a calendar is just that, the end of a calendar. Things start over and the new calendar begins. But I am personally, because of interviews that I have done with so many scientists for reports at Erstfiles.com and for the radio work that I do in the United States, I interview scientists on a regular basis every week, ranging from astronomy to archaeology to anthropology, biology, and medicine and so forth. And one of the, we'll call it one of the themes that I have come to understand is that there are many scientists looking for evidence on our planet that there might be cycles, that there might be something that happens between the sun and the solar system and the Earth, or the sun and the galactic center, in which there have been gigantic fires that existed in Turkey and along parts of the Mediterranean that have never been explained. Was it a meteorite that came in? Was it a comet? What is it that would cause thousands of square miles to burn on the planet that has never been explained? It is not described in literature. Well, could we, in the crop formations, be dealing with intelligences that can see from some vantage point our planet, the evolution of life on this earth, have watched it, have monitored it, and for some reason they want us to know that there are cycles. There can be cycles of destruction, and maybe there can be cycles of new life. And that is what makes, I think, personally, the next 7 years quite fascinating. What will happen in 2012? Will anything happen? Already the Earth is going through such a bumpy time on its own with global warming, with the sun being highly active at a time when it is supposed to be at solar minimum, and it's releasing 9 X flares in a few days in September, leaving solar physicists scratching their head. What's going on the sun?
That's a very concerning development. I watch the solar monitor, the NOAA website, quite closely all the time, and the sun should be very calm at this time.
And it's not.
And it's not, no.
And you know what made the September flares even more astounding? I have a wonderful report about this at Erstfiles.com. There were these 9 X flares in a few days, and Tariq, all 9 of them came from the same sunspot. This has never happened on record in any world science. No one has ever been able to document 9 X flares coming from the same sunspot. You might have a solar maximum in which the sun was covered with sunspots and have 9 X flares coming in a few days from a bunch of sunspots. The fact that one sunspot released these many X flares is considered unique.
So, coming back to our main subject, crop circles, we're coming at the end of the show. Crop circles could be a warning sign then, warning us of maybe an event that appears that happens on the sun that affects the Earth. There are a lot of people out there saying this. Ed Dane, for example, is one who's been talking for years about the kill shot. I'm sure you heard about.
Right. Well, let's put it this way: the crop formations may be involved with a warning. And that warning, though, could be involved with something as difficult to understand as time travelers. And that's all I could ask you and your listeners to do, is expand your mind as far as you can go and realize that we have physical evidence all over our planet, in the cereal crops and grasses of this world, that something that works in math has been laying down these incredible patterns now for 15 to 20 years. Whether humans understand it or not, it must be related to some kind of process. And if it's a process, then maybe it has a climax, a completion. When will that occur? Will it be 2012?
That's the $64,000 question, I guess. Do you think that 2012 is the year when actually those things culminate? Or what's your personal take on this?
Well, I mean, I only raised the question because Jaime Maussan in Mexico City and other people in South America are raising that question in their own TV broadcasts. Even if you're not getting those broadcasts in Austria and those TV broadcasts are not in the United States, they are being broadcast in Mexico and South America. These kinds of questions about 2012 are really on the minds of the Mexican and South American people. And of course, Mexico and the Yucatan is where you have the Mayan and the Aztec cultures. And so it means that often if you're in Austria and you have a large Austrian audience, what's in your minds does not reflect what's in the minds of people in other countries. And sometimes it's hard for people to realize there is a lot of different consciousness on this earth, tremendous variations in thought and what's possible. And what we are going to experience in the next 7 years as we get to December of 2012 may or may not be related to the intelligence behind crop formations. But what intrigues me is that every scientist that I have ever talked to, on or off the record, is impressed by what they find as profound intelligence with mathematical language in crop formation.
Well, thanks, Linda. That was a very interesting insight into this year's season. I'm afraid we came to the end of our show today. And, well, it keeps on being very... we still don't know what... Yes, curious. We just still don't know what it is.
Right, and I hope you and your audience will continually go to earthfiles.com to try to keep up with the Earth's mysteries that I'm reporting about, including crop formations.
Yes, and of course your website is linked up numerously from this show and other shows on my website. So, thanks, Linda, very much for being my guest tonight, and I hope you can give us an update sometime soon in the future.
All right, Tariq, thank you for inviting me, and God bless everyone.
Okay. Have a nice day. It's actually midday in Albuquerque now, isn't it?
It is.
Okay.
The sun is shining bright, and I'm sure it's dark where you are.
Yes, it's dark and it's getting cold.
All right.
All right.
Take
Thanks
care.
very much. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Ja, das war Linda Moulton Howe, live aus Albuquerque, New Mexico. Wir wissen halt noch immer nicht, was Kornkreise wirklich bedeuten, und ich meine, ich möchte mich entschuldigen, dass ich auf nicht allzu viele Fragen im Chat eingegangen bin, aber es ist halt, alles, was man tun kann, ist spekulieren. Das ist leider so. Wenn jemand die definitive Antwort auf all diese Fragen wüsste, würde man ihm wahrscheinlich nicht glauben, weil sie so verrückt wäre, dass sie einfach keiner glauben würde. So kommt es mir einfach vor. Aber vielleicht ist die Antwort auch ganz einfach. Und wir verstehen sie deshalb nicht. Jedenfalls, die ganzen Artikel, die da heute besprochen wurden, sind, beziehungsweise wären dann noch, die fehlen, in der Past-Show-Sektion verlinkt. Ich kann nur jedem empfehlen, auf die Crop Circle Connector Seite zu gehen und sich selbst ein Bild zu machen von den wirklich erstaunlichen Formationen, die heuer da aufgegangen sind in England, in Südengland. War sicherlich einer der kreativsten Seasons, von wem auch immer diese Kreativität kam. Das ist eben die Frage, die wir auch heute nicht beantworten konnten. Oh Wunder. Ja, das nächste Mal zu Gast ist Nicola Wohlgemuth, und es geht um einmal ein ganz anderes Thema zur Abwechslung. Es geht ganz einfach um Mann und Frau. Ein Thema, das uns eigentlich alle beschäftigt und dem wir auch kaum auskommen. Und Nicola Wohlgemuth hat dazu sehr interessante Position und wird uns da ihre Sicht der Dinge schildern. Ja, also nächstes Mal Nicola Wohlgemuth mit einem etwas anderen Thema. Es geht nicht um Außerirdische, sondern um Venusier und um Marsianer, wie manche glauben. Und ich freue mich schon drauf. Das Ganze findet statt am 14. Oktober 2005. Bis dann, macht's es gut.